Okay, folks, here we go. Moving on to the new things for today, starting with the conditional statement. And we read this as if P, then Q. If P, then Q. If P, then Q. This is the symbolic form with the arrow. This is how you'd read that in English. If P, then Q. Another equivalent way to read it is a little more rare, but is to say P is sufficient for Q. You think just long enough about what that means, it means basically the same as if P then Q, right? It's saying P is sufficient for Q, meaning that if you know P, then Q follows. And then this other one is a little more confusing. It says Q only if P. And the way to remember this is to look at it carefully and notice that the if is still attached to the P part. So it's saying if P, then Q essentially, right? They kind of reverse the order of the sentence, but still the if is applied to the P. If P, then Q. Or Q, if P. Okay, the conditional statement is always true except for one case, when you start off true on the left and end up false on the right. So in other words, if the P is, well, we know, when I say P, what I mean is the thing on the left of the arrow. The thing on the left of the arrow is true. The thing on the right of the arrow is true. Then this compound statement is considered to be true. Anytime the left starts off as false, it doesn't matter what happens after that, we consider that compound statement to be true. The only time that we have a false is if we start off true on the left and end up false on the right. That's the only time that we consider the conditional statement, this is the conditional statement we're talking about, to be false. So with that in mind, let's complete the truth table. As usual, try it first before you watch the rest of this video. Okay, here's the start. So I'm assuming you tried it already. You start the same way every time. Half trues, half falses for that first column. And then if I did two at a time, that means the next time I'm going to do one at a time. I'm going to alternate. So this is the standard start to a 4-row truth table. 4 rows because I have 2 simple statements. And that means 2 times 2, right? I multiply 2 times to get 4 rows. Okay, now, looking at this, when is my conditional statement true? As long as I start off true, ended up true. Or I started off false. And if I start off false, it doesn't matter what happens. I consider the the conditional statement to be true. So what's the one time it's false? One time it's false is if the left side of the arrow is true and the right side of the arrow is false. That's the one time it's false. Now, this brings up another little trick or tip. When you're doing a truth table with the conditional statement, look for where the left is true and the right of the arrow, yeah, the right is false. That's when it's false. That's the only time a conditional, and conditional is that arrow where it's like when you have that arrow symbol. That's the only time it's false. Now here's a little intuition for why that would make sense. Just intuitive idea. This is the way I think of it personally. So I like to think of it in terms of false advertising. So when could you say that you have legal grounds to claim false advertising? So when do we get false in advertising? So think about this example with me. Let's say this is the statement: if I use product X, then you will develop superpowers. That's clearly an if-then statement or a conditional statement, right? Here, this is the left side of the statement, the P part, say. If something, then. So this then part, this if-then part is the arrow. You develop superpowers, that's like the Q part, right? So if I use it, then I develop superpowers. So let's look at our different possible combinations one at a time. So let's say true and true. True meaning I used the product and then I did develop superpowers. In that case, would you say that's false advertising? And the answer is no, right? That's not false advertising because the product worked. You got superpowers. What complaint do you have? Let's skip this one for now. Let's look at the next combination. Let's say I did not use the product and I somehow ended up with superpowers anyway. If you did not use the product, but you still got superpowers, would you claim false advertising? And the answer is, well, obviously not, because you got superpowers. And anyways, you didn't even use a product, right? The last case, if you did not use a product, so P is false, and you did not develop superpowers, so that's false too. Can you claim false advertising? Well, no, because if you don't use the product at all, then what grounds do you have to claim false advertising? Right? You didn't even use a product. So it doesn't matter what happens in the end, whether or not you get superpowers, there's no reason to have, there's no legal grounds to claim false advertising. Now, what is the one time that you can claim false advertising? That would be is if you use the product, so that part is true, the P part is true, and you did not get superpowers, so the Q part is false. So we start off true on the left. Oops, wrong pen. We started off true on the left of the arrow. We ended up false on the right side of the arrow. Then that is grounds for false advertising because you used the product and it did not work. So you have a claim, right? Anyway, that's just the intuitive way of why I think it makes sense to have the truth table come out the way it does. But if that explanation does not work for you, that's okay. You just have to basically remember what this pattern is in that case. Or come up with your own reasoning or your own example. All right, let's finish out this page. Let me look ahead. What's the next page? Okay. Yeah, let's finish this page and then let's actually do a little bit more of the next page for this second video. So number 3 says translate the following into symbols. I'm going to erase this other stuff to get it out of the way. So P is the statement that you eat curry. Q is the statement you shower. And R is the statement you smell like a toaster. Remember our notation, the colons indicate to you what those statements are representing. So P is representing this first statement, etc. And what we're doing is we're just translating, kind of like we did last time, right? This first statement says, if you eat curry and you don't shower, then you'll smell like a toaster. So what's the translation? It's actually very simple. When you have an if, the if then indicates, so this part in conjunction with the then, that indicates where the arrow is going to be. The arrow is going to be right where the and then is. But the if kind of cooperates with the then to make that, yeah. So that's where the arrow is. What's on the left of the arrow? Well, there's actually a little compound statement. You eat curry and you don't shower. So how would you translate that? You eat curry is a P and is the and symbol. You don't shower would be the negation of you do shower, so negation Q. And then you will smell like a toaster. That's the R part. You smell like a toaster or you will smell like a toaster. Okay, so just combining that, a little more concise, like squishing it together. That would be P and not Q, the right arrow to R. That's the answer for number 3. Okay, number 4. I thought number 4 is another translation question, but actually it's not. It's just it's a separate question altogether. So now, number 4. Zooming in number 4. Number 4 is kind of like what we finished class with last time when we we're doing evaluations of compound statements being true or false. So here's our compound statement there. And we're given that P is true, Q is false, and R is true. So new situation here. Not related to question number 3. So how do I do this question? Well, let me just start by copying this portion right here. Can you copy this by itself? Yeah, let's just try. Actually, let me copy this whole question. I don't want that. I don't want that. Okay. Let's go down to the scratch paper. All right, it worked. Except I got a couple little red marks. Sorry about that. Okay, so what I'm going to start by doing is I'm just going to copy the question again. P and Q in parentheses, arrow to R. And the first step, remember the first step? You just fill in whatever the truth values are. So here P was true, and R was also true. Q was false. And in between, I have all the symbols intact as they were. So 1 free point for writing that. Remember, just insight into correcting however many steps. That's basically how many points the question is worth. And this first step is worth 1 point. Okay, next would be the parentheses. True and false is false. And then the true at the end, that just carries over. So now I have a conditional statement, and we just finished talking about the truth of conditional statement. If I started false on the left, the overall statement is automatically going to be true. And so there's your answer. Real quick too, guys, I didn't mention this earlier, but when we have conditional statements, they fall in line in our order of operations. So remember our order of operations so far, we had parentheses, followed by negations, followed by ands and ors. Also parentheses, negations, ands and ors. And then the new operation we learned today was the conditional statement. So these are kind of going in order of operations from the order that we learned them in. Now remember we learned negations first, and then we did ands and ors. Now we did the conditional statement. So the conditional statement, so far from what we've learned, that is the last thing to happen. It sticks the latest. Sticks last. You do it last, I mean, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, number 5. Let P be this statement, Q be that statement, and now you're evaluating the truth of those compound statements. Let's do the same thing and copy this question down. Bring it down to the scratch paper to do. Make sure you guys are trying every question before watching the solution. Okay, got the little piece of one there, but oh well. That's all right. Okay, so to start, let's evaluate the truth of these statements. So P is the equation that 1 plus 1 equals 2. That statement that 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. Is that a true statement? Yes, that's a true statement. And Q is a statement that 4 is a prime number. Remember, prime numbers are numbers that are divisible by number 1 and themselves. So the prime numbers are things like 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17. 4 is not one of them because it's divisible by 2. So 4 is not prime. That means that's a false statement. 4 is not a prime number. So with that in mind, let's evaluate. Letter A, I've got P and not Q. And then here, letter B, I've got P and not Q. Right arrow to not P. First step, just fill in the truth values. Yeah, P is true, Q is false. Keep the other symbols intact. And then remember the order of operations here. Negation happens first before the and. So the negation of a false is going to be true. I've got true and true, which in the end is true. That's the answer. All right, letter B. Same first step. Just fill in the truth values. Q was false. P was true. Keep all your symbols intact for that first step. Okay, so that, what's that? Parentheses first, right? Within the parentheses, I got that negation. So negation is going to give me true. So I have true and true inside of the parentheses. And just carry everything down. Now the parentheses is next. True and true is true. So I've got a true arrow to negation of... let's do that step at the same time. No, I take it back. You can, but just so I don't confuse anybody, let's do one thing at a time. So I've got true arrow to negation true. Next thing that would happen would be the negation. Negation sticks closer, or it's higher in priority than the conditional. So the negation happens next. That means false on the right, true on the left. If I start off true on the left and that false on the right, that is the one time that a conditional statement is false. So the answer is false. All right, that's that. Okay, moving on to the next page. Now we've got 2 more truth tables to make. Let me think. Do I want to split this into another video? I'm going to make a new video for this next part. Yeah, I know my original plan was to just power through 9, but I think it makes more sense to split this up. So we might end up with 4 videos depending on how long the next 4 questions take. I'll see you guys in a very short bit.